such a kind introduction, which I'm sure will be not enduring necessarily. I was quite surprised to be asked to do this because David has become quite grand since the first time I became aware of him. Some of you may know he used to be the National Party's, and then very lowly designation, their sort of IT boy. And that's the way they used to put it. You used to be vaguely aware of David sort of scuttling around the floor at national party conferences on his hands and knees, faffing around with sockets and laptops. It does. Matrons still come up and brand him. Hey, boy, would you please see to my PowerPoint, internet thingy? There's a good chap, would you? But I realised, in fact, it's so grand as it's become. I thought, because he was telling me all about this function at great length, and I thought, he's going to ask me to hand around drinks. And the reason, am I not? Oh, okay. How's that? Is that
Up a bit.
Up a bit? I've just lost an earring. Okay, but I realised that I actually do owe David a favour because apart from noticing him scuttling around the floor, the first time I met him was probably the early 90s, probably about 10 years before he started his blog, at a National Party conference, a central regional conference, and I think somewhere like Farrar. And Jim Bolger said in his keynote speech that he thought New Zealand would one day become a republic. And he never said that before. And there was a lot of delegates going, yes, we should become a republic, that's a jolly good idea. So I duly reported this, and it was the front page lead on a Sunday morning in my newspaper. What I didn't realise was that at the time, very few National Party delegates understood that this very fine and noble and important sounding thing of becoming a republic meant that you didn't have a monarchy. And so when they read in my paper that Jim Bolger had basically suggested getting rid of their beloved Queen, they went quite feral. And there were speeches from the floor first thing that morning, wanted me to be banned from the conference, how disgraceful it was, this jumped up media contingent, what were they even doing here, and as for that one, and so on. And it was actually quite scary, and I have to say that Jim Bolger gave me the charity of his silence. Anyway, up popped from the back, from the Young Nats contingent, this fellow who reminded me of a jolly, happy little Ribena berry. Mr. Chairman, this is a wonderful idea of the Prime Minister's bill. I'm so excited that he's articulated it. It's very far-seeing of him and very well reported by, and he basically stuck up for me. And I remember thinking, boy, he's a brave young chap because he only looked about 12.
I was.
So, and certainly I've got to say that, probably about 10 years later, setting up your own blog under your own name, in the days when blogs were, even if people knew what that name meant, they were regarded as rather sinister and pretty show-offy in New Zealand. And certainly, not readily understood in any way. But he was determined about it and fearless. The prescience to put dibs on the name Kiwiblog was pretty audacious. Actually, David regularly got monstering letters from some other dude overseas who registered a very similar name and kept threatening David with lawyers' letters saying, give it up, bud, I'm going to see you off this field, you're not a blogger's backside, blah, blah, blah. Well, I have to tell you, David now owns his domain name as well. Yes, for David. But there are also attempts by the National Party to get Kiwiblog to cease and desist because they didn't, I know, but they didn't know what it was he was trying to do. I think part of that was because I'm informed that by that time, he, in his IT role, he also had become rather well known as, shall we say, an efficient vector for the dissemination of information, even without technology. Okay? In fact, he could get a nice bit of gossip around the parliamentary and beehive precinct, in a way that predates ultra-fast broadband. So some of the MPs thought Kiwiblog was potentially subversive.
They were right.
And they were right, yeah. But I suspect that Maurice Williamson, among others, kind of tactfully put them straight that you know, you couldn't actually shut down David's blog because the internet didn't work like that. And actually, by the way, David's one of us, you know, he's a Tory, and actually he could be quite useful to us. And, you know, so it proved. And I must say, I still get quite a giggle when I hear various people run the trap saying it's a disgrace that, you know, Kiwiblog and Whale Oil get a feed straight from the National Party, straight from the beehive. And it's like, well, yeah. Why wouldn't National Party people feed to pro-National Party blogs? Anyway, that's why they feed to them and not the likes of me, but there we go. Anyway.
You get the standard.
Whoa. Anyway, I'll just gloss over that. David cottoned on pretty quickly that, you know, even if he were to write very wittily about politics, he would only get his friends to read the blog, and while that was even then a considerable circle, you needed to become something more. So he, again, was, you know, an early adopter of the concept of being an aggregator. So he made Kiwiblog into a sort of digest of political and related news, which sometimes he'd give a bit of blue wash, but sometimes he wouldn't. And it became, you know, instead of a kind of, like much of the internet I find is a bit of a time waster and really good procrastinating tool, especially when I have to do the reduced tea. David's actually became quite a useful tool to many of us. In fact, most of us, you know, if you've only got to look at his hit numbers. And he, you know, he was developing his polling at the same time, and so he would be able to add some extra number crunching to the various issues of the day and thrill some of us anoraks who were just absolutely overjoyed to see league tables of who had asked the most parliamentary questions and where such and such an MP sat in terms of how many of them had issued press releases, and then most tellingly who'd got published. It was a real sorter of the goats from the sheep. But at one stage, you know, David has been a victim of his own success. There was a bit of a punch-up with Clifton, who couldn't believe that David could achieve such a fast turnaround in analysing
Keith's hiding.
I know. It's unfair, by the way.
Keep fine.
Couldn't believe that, you know, David wasn't getting a spoon feed from the beehive. Couldn't believe that it was all David's own work, and so they had some sort of pistol fight at dawn in which David turned over all his emails and all his phone traffic and so on, and they declared a sort of uneasy truce. But I'm afraid it nearly came to an end one night untidily when one Cactus Kate encountered David and Keith in Courtney Place, presumably having their make-up dinner. And Kathy, well, David was unable, I'm told, and this may be embroidered, but to prevent Kathy from surging up to Keith, grabbing him, getting him in a fireman's list, abducting him several metres up the street and dumping him in the gutter.
Which a hug.
All of which goes to say, they will teach him to mess with David. He's got some very scary friends. He does actually have a great network of friends, and I'm told that once, in about probably 1993, he actually paid attention to his friends all night and didn't consult his phone or laptop once. This may happen again, you never know. One of those friends, Matthew Hooton, who's also here, said...
Friend?
Well,
Who wrote the speech?
Set David and Cameron Slater, aka Whale Oil, up with a sponsorship from a premixed cocktail company for, I think it was a 2008 election, which gave them a Winnebago known as the Blogmobile. They wanted it to be known as something else beginning with B-mobile, but they didn't quite work out, because there were some suggestions that the intoxicating mix of a mobile home with these two fine specimens of, you know, National Party and all the pre-mixed pina coladas you could drink would be absolutely irresistible to young ladies. Fortunately for everyone's virtue, this was never put to the test because entry to the Blogmobile became impossible owing to the accumulation of McDonald's and pizza boxes. But it's fair to say that both David and Cameron, who I don't think he's here, is he? No. But they've had since what I'd have to call a midriff crisis. And they both shrunk considerably. And so a note of warning.
Cameron had Trevor to help him. Bye, Grace.
Cheers. So thanks to a note of a combination of the app My Diet and something called Belovegeddon, There may be only a discrete, in the forthcoming elections in Winnebago, a discrete detritus of wasabi sachets and carrot sticks to bring in the blogmobile, and I just think we should be warned. Now, it's fair to say David does travel a lot, but he will never be an international man of mystery. That he doesn't blog about, whether it's becoming the mayor of a sushi shop on Foursquare, whatever that means, conquering Tinakori Hill for the 10th time without a Sherpa, or hitting the Bellagio in Vegas with his latest squeeze. I think we all have elderly aunts who are keener to show us their holiday snaps than David. There are also theatre reviews, notes on restaurant, inventories of calories consumed, and so on. But, we can mock. David's been ahead of the curve in realising that, personalising a blog once you've reached a certain status is a good idea. It needs broad appeal. And he's also got, I'm told, and I take this with a grain of salt, but he has got groupies now, because he's also fashioned a bit of a legend for himself, about being a bit of a wolf. And a very sort of colleague of mine interviewed him for The Listener a couple of years ago, and I tell you what, I have never seen The Listener so deftly used as a dating agency. I hope it worked out, David. Anyway, but there is, however, one serious concern about the activity of David and some of his fellow traveller members of the vast right-wing conspiracy. And I think you should know about it, and I would be not surprised if this was the real reason behind the government's unseemly haste passing the beefed-up GCSB bill. And a clue to this was a post David made a couple of years ago, which I'm sure you'll all remember. David standing beside a rental BMW, which, so we were told, he had managed to manoeuvre backwards, rump first, up a hill where it got wedged with half of its chassis suspended in mid-air. Now, I wondered why he posted this at the time, because I thought, geez, I'd be embarrassed. And then I realised, because I've actually done the same thing myself with a 1990 Mitsubishi Galant. And I can tell you, it is no easy feat. It takes some doing. And that made me really suspicious, So the official story was, of course, David's such a helpless, harmless character that, he had to ask other blokes to come and fish him out of the soup. But this is actually, I reckon, a blind. Because I've subsequently discovered through research that probably makes me an enemy of the state according to the Defence Department, but we'll put that aside, that the photo was taken in Puhoi. And it was taken as David had motored on up to one of Simon Lusk's secret training camps for National Party candidates. You laugh.
Like the Puhoi.
It was in Puhoi, not Tuhoi. Now, that's pretty suspicious, don't you think? Normally these training camps are held not in the Uruweras, but in more sinisterly remote and secluded places like John Slater's waterfront palace in Pauanui, and Alan Gibbs's so-called sculpture park. You can laugh, but you know that Gibbs keeps military tanks and helicopters and craft on the property, and you think they're really just sculptures, don't you? Anyway, so that was what David was doing, and it's my understanding that sort of training that Lusk secretly puts people like David and Cameron through makes Tamaiti's lot look like a bunch of geniuses. They do sort of dastardly counterinsurgency, and the key to it is the dark arts of subliminal propaganda. Now, admittedly, you wouldn't call Cameron Slater particularly subliminal. With all that, gun and military porn and dead cats. But again, that's just a blind. Because actually, when you look into it carefully, as I have, every day 1,000 cyber knitting needles goes into the kidneys quietly of the vast right-wing conspiracy's enemies through Lusk's cunning tactics via Kiwiblog and Whale. Like David's postings on how little time it takes him to get 10 out of 10 in the Herald stuff. You wouldn't believe how that psychs out the Labour Party. How close he is to world domination of Foursquare. The epic bushwalks, the boxing training, all those my run posts. What are they training for? what are these posts really? It's code. And the pseudonyms. I mean, the left is an open book. We all know who Eddie is and Irish Bellows and all those people in the standard. It's fairly obvious. But who is Jadis? David. Who is the owl? The planning parrot. What is he planning? I mean, really, who's the bin man? And most disquietly, who is Auckland Girl?
Hands up, she's here.
Well, don't blow her cover. Anyway, so yeah, but this is the depth charger, I think, from the Lusk Dark Arts, posting numerous articles on these blogs about how many Labour men are, quote, mad rooters, unquote. Nothing demoralises Labour men more than getting a reputation for being successful and getting partners into the scratcher. It's very evil. So yeah, he may look like a pleasant fellow, but never forget he can immobilise your BMW as soon as they look at you. So I think, even after 10 years, the jury's still out as to the real purpose of Kiwiblog.
Thanks, Jane. I just saw